One of the cooler things about murder ballads in particular, but old songs in general, is the way they give you insights into the way people and society used to function and the way they used to think. There's a song called The Old Oak Tree that is originally Irish, though there's American versions. It was done by the Boys of the Loch on their 1972 or 73 live album that talks about a process called cruentation, which is also known as bier-right or the ordeal of the bleeding corpse. And what this was a type of interrogation where the suspected killer would be brought into the presence of the murder victim, dead body, and it was believed that the dead body could make itself bleed or sometimes move or even make noise in order to let the witnesses know that their killer was present. So they would make people walk by the body, sometimes call out to it by name or touch it. And if it began to bleed, which was probably pus, if anything, that would be considered proof, forensic evidence, that this was the guilty party. And this seems ridiculous, something that they would do back in the Middle Ages or the Roman times, and they did use it back then. But this was also continued up until at least the 1860s in the United States. And the last case that I know of was one in Illinois where they had 200 people walk past a dead body to try to figure out which of them was the murderer. In the song The Old Oak Tree, it's not clear. I mean, they don't call it cruentation, but what happens is the murderer is brought into the presence of the corpse, and the corpse just begins to spontaneously bleed. And if you didn't know that this was a type of evidence, it would seem ridiculous because the corpse in the song has been dead for months, apparently, and yet still bleeds. But what this is showing the listeners at the time, and they would have all known this, is that, aha, that's the guilty party. So I'm going to try to perform this song now, using the version of the Boys of the Loch. Oh, the night grew dark, cold blew the wind, and heavy fell the rain. Young Betsy left her own dear home and came not back again. She pulled the plaid around her head to keep herself secure. She left her widowed mother's side, walked quickly from the door. Oh, the night been gone and day come on, and Betsy was not home. And all her friends did wonder why young Betsy she would roam. Our mother she got up one day and she cried an ancient while, saying I'll travel the country round and round for to find the child. 3 weary weeks she spent in grief, and she traveled the country round, but her journey proved of no avail. Young Betsy was not found. Oh, she wrung her hands, she pulled her hair, and bitterly she cried, saying I'll go home no more to roam, and broken-hearted died. Interludes are important. Catch your breath. Near the scene of all the woe lived the owner of the ground. Yes, Squire MacCollin went out one day to hunt with all his hounds. Over hills, dales, rocks he hotly rode in gallant company, till as by chance they lost the fox beneath the old oak tree. It was there the dogs began to yelp and tear and snuff the clay, and all the blows of MacCollin's whip could not drive the dogs away. The gentlemen all gathered round, and they called for pick and spade, and they dug the ground wherein they found the missing murdered maid. Her lily-white breast whereon she lay were blackened with kicks and blows, and from fresh wounds the blood gushed forth and trickled through her nose. Oh, I done the deed, MacCollin cried, my soul is fled for hell. Take her cold corpse from my sight, and I the tale will tell. I courted with this pretty fair maid to my sad grief and pain, I courted with this fair young maid, to my sad grief and shame. And on this she pled, till I grew tired, and then it seemed to me that the devil whispered, take her life, that way you shall be free. Ah, there is the knife that up I took, and plunged into her breast, and I blackened her with kicks and blows, I need not tell the rest. Ah, there he stood, and bitterly cried an anguished wail of pain, and he drew a pistol from his breast, and fired it through his brain. Ah, they buried him just where he lay, no Christian grave had he, for none was found would bless the ground beneath the old oak tree. He had a guilty conscience, and the blood from the corpse made him confess. The old oak tree.